guys, everything alright? Today I'll be discussing with you what are the differences and what is the best tool between n8n and Make. So my name is Tamiris. I've been working with software development and growth marketing since 2016. I've already helped over 60 companies to scale more efficiently, adding into their pockets around 70 million additional dollars. And today I'll be discussing with you how you can structure your own project utilizing n8n or make.con. So whenever we are deciding what is the best tool for our no-code/low-code project or app that we are trying to develop, we need to take into consideration certain factors. One of them, and the most important that I will focus my analysis today, is how comfortable you are with coding. So there is a huge difference between no code and low code that some people don't consider when they are essentially fresh, trying to start their first project and trying to explore a little bit more. So we need to consider how comfortable you are with coding, and also we need to consider other factors such as scalability, security, cost, and also native/pre-made integrations that some of these tools have with other softwares/apps that you might want to utilize on your workflow. So having said that, I will go through all of these areas and we will understand what are essentially the best scenarios that you can utilize Make, and also the best scenarios that you can utilize n8n in a smart way. So before starting with the technicalities, I will go first for pricing because I think that's important for us to uncover. So n8n starts off with a base plan on the annually subscription for $20 per month for the quote-unquote starter plan. So one thing that I want to highlight over here is that this plan that I'm showing you is hosted by n8n, which means that you don't need a server, you don't need to quote-unquote self-host, but you will have additional costs by having it hosted by n8n. So keep that in mind. Again, this is connected to how comfortable you are with being technical. If you don't want to manage a server, if you don't want to manage cloud, then going for this plan might save you a bunch of time if you don't have the knowledge on how to essentially quote-unquote self-host. But if you do have the knowledge about how you can host an app, for example, locally or on cloud, you can do that and you will save a bit more money. For this comparison specifically, I would choose this plan for us because it is the plan that I'm utilizing right now on my account. But keep in mind that you can save some money if you were to host n8n yourself. So the main difference between them is essentially the workflow executions and active workflows that you can have. If you are dealing with a simple operation, maybe you are doing a workflow to simplify just one or two specific scenarios on your project, then the starter plan is good. But if you are, for example, a big agency trying to automate a lot of processes, or if you are trying to open your own automation agency, then you will have to start off most likely on the pro version because 5 active workflows are not a lot. So this is the main components over here that you can essentially utilize to decide. One thing that I also noticed is that on the starter plan, you don't have a lot of history/backup of what you are doing, while you do have more history, so more versions that you can later on restore as a backup, for example, if you go for the pro plan as well. Now, if we do compare with Make, they do have, first of all, more tiers of pricing. You can see over here that they have at least 4. And they do have a free tier that you can utilize to play a bit, understand a bit more how the tool works. So this is one thing that you can certainly utilize if you want just to, for example, learn how to utilize tools like Make and n8n, etc., like workflow, low code/no code automation tools. They do have a more I would say, affordable plan. That is the core plan, which is $9 per month. So it is pretty affordable. Even the pro plan is $16 per month if paid annually. So overall, Make is cheaper than n8n. But they do have some nuance over here that if you want to have more operations, then you will have to acquire this and it can get more expensive. So please be mindful again of the number of operations, aka how much you will like utilize and automate on your day-to-day, so you won't be surprised with additional costs that you were not expecting. This is just like the base level of what you can get. But if you are like a more hardcore user, you will likely have to buy more operations, and then the cost will rise. I would say slightly, hardly for a smaller agency slash smaller project. You will utilize more than like 10 to 20K operations. So it will still be likely slightly cheaper than n8n, or kind of like ballpark same price. So in terms of pricing, I would say that's not the major factor that you will balance when you are making your decision, because they do have kind of similar pricing. You will likely spend around $25 to $30 each per month. If you are a smaller project slash agency, if you are a bigger agency, or if you want to have like a fully automated operations, then you will likely have to pay more, like maybe $50-ish per month. But again, both of the tools have similar pricing for like the pro plan, which are like $50, around $50. So pricing is not the biggest deal here. So let's dive inside of the tools so we can understand what is the biggest deal, what are the main differences between them. So this is how the dashboard slash homepage of n8n looks like on the inside. Here you can see the number of executions you had on a particular month, and also the number of active workflows. I think you can personalize that if you want to, but I didn't feel the need to do so. So let's go for one scenario so I can show you an example of how this actually looks like on a day-to-day practice. So for example, I'll take one that is very simple, like the FAQ generator one. So this is how it looks like inside of n8n. You can see that we have kind of like nodes slash modules over here that we add. It's pretty linear on average for like simpler automation style stuff. And then of course, each one of these nodes, they do a specific action. So for example, this one over here is a form submit action. So if I were to test just this module slash node, it opens essentially a form. This is one that we can use natively on n8n. You don't need to integrate that into another tool, for example. So here you can define what are the mandatory slash required fields, which are the optional fields, etc. So you can see over here that it is natively done by n8n. Then you can have, for example, one operation for creating a Google Doc. You can have, for example, one operation for essentially making a request on an API. So over here, I'm utilizing the Perplexity API. So essentially, you have different boxes slash like nodes that you can utilize to form a sequence, a logic sequence to do a particular workflow slash operation. And this is quite similar to what we have, honestly, on like Make as well. So they do have these UI structured in a way that is quite similar. So over here, as you can see on Make, we do have also these nodes that we connect, and that each one of them do a particular operation. This one specifically is an automation that I did to essentially collect all the tasks that I have active on ClickUp and send on Slack as a weekly report, so my team can essentially keep track of everything that we're doing, and they can also send this to our clients, so they can keep track of our work and our progress on a particular project, right? So here you can see, for example, that we have ClickUp node that is native, so Make already has a ClickUp node. You don't have to execute any new integration over here. We have Google Sheets, essentially as one native. We have Google Docs, Slack, etc. We have even like GPT over here as a native node / like module that they have over here. So in this regard, the UI is quite similar. Then you can ask me, Tammy, go on where is the main difference? The main difference between Make and n8n, in my perception, is how technical you must be to be able to utilize the tools. And then there are pros and cons to how technical you need to be. So for you, if you don't have a lot of coding background, if you are like a marketer, or if you are a designer, or a person that like never worked with APIs before, JSON before, backend applications, database, blah, 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 then I heavily suggest Make. Because Make already has built-in kind of like a logic system that you can essentially choose their own like variables to essentially fill the technicalities. So let me open a node and show you exactly what I mean. For example, we have a webhook node, and the only thing that you kind of need to set up over here is essentially like the URL for the particular webhook. Then you can essentially select the number of results, and kind of that's it. If you want to make a new connection, if we were to make a new connection, there are like 2-3 additional fields that we need to fill, but the webhook is already done. So let me show you also, for example, how we set a particular variable. So this is a way for us to set a particular variable, and the way that we do that is that essentially we utilize these pre-made variables that we have in Make to build the code, right? So it's not actually coding. So that's why Make, in my perception, is like 80-20 no code, because they help you with this abstraction that they do over here, that you don't have to code to be able to build some simple operations. So for example, over here we have like format date, add days, now, etc. So these are all pre-made parameters, so to speak, that Make does for us. So you don't have to know how to write code, for example, a JSON or a Python or a JavaScript in order to do that. So this is very friendly for people just like myself that are like marketers, designers, etc. Because then you just need to essentially understand like the logic of what you want to create, and you can create it. You don't have a major technical blocker. Of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. You do have a little bit of like programming logic that you have to know, but you don't have to know like deeply a particular language / framework in order to build your flows. You can, like for example, tell GPT to help you to build the logic and help you to essentially debug, and I think that's enough, and you can create a lot with that. So it's very beginner friendly as well, and they do have a lot of integrations. So let me show you over here. When you click on plus, you can actually uncover a lot of potential integrations that they have with other parties. So for example, if you want to make an integration with WhatsApp, they already have over here WhatsApp Business Cloud. If you want to make an integration with Monday, you can already integrate with this node / module that they have over here. If you want to make an integration with ClickUp, as I showed you over here, Google Stack like Sheets, Doc, Drive, Form, all over here. So they do have a lot of what they call apps that you can add on your workflow, which they call scenario, and you can already do a lot with that, essentially. So what is the difference when we go for n8n? So n8n is way more technical. So I would take one node on n8n to show you the difference between the two. Over here we have essentially an operation that will generate FAQs. So FAQs. I'll change the name so you can essentially be able to understand what I'm saying. So this is a node that is made essentially to generate FAQs. And as you can see, even the language is already way more technical than what is being portrayed on make. So for example, we need to choose a method like post, like get, head, options, patch, delete, etc. Then we need to connect with the API through a URL, which is pretty standard, but again, it's reliant on a certain knowledge of coding that you need to have to do that. Then you have the type of authentication, etc. Then you can choose essentially what you want to build your instructions on. So essentially I chose JSON. So body content type JSON, right? And then over here, which is the heart of this operation, you can see that I have actually a snippet of code, a snippet of JSON, to essentially tell the AI what I want to be done, the API more specifically, what I want to be done. So essentially I have to specify the model, role, and then the content, and then insert role again, content, some parameters over here, etc. So I have to be very specific also with the syntax, essentially. So if I wrote anything here that wasn't according to JSON, anything that like the format wasn't JSON friendly, it would break. So this gets way more complex for people that don't know much about how to code. I do have a little bit of background on coding, so I am able to build certain scenarios over here without getting stuck. But people that have completely like fresh views about coding, never had experience coding whatsoever, I wouldn't recommend n8n because you do need to know your ways around. At least I would say how to connect to a particular API, JSON, and like basic JavaScript and maybe Python. So you need to know at least the basics. Are you able to navigate with ChatGPT and then like together with it code and go to like n8n forums and go to YouTube tutorials and etc. and be able to actually manage to build something even though you don't know how to code? Yes, definitely, but you will have to learn at least the basics of how to code. So if you're a person that has any type of like hardship with coding, I wouldn't recommend n8n because you have to get used to code at least the basics. So on a pure like definition, n8n is not a no code, it is a low code. So you are able to do a lot without having to code too much, but you do have to code a little bit in order to extract something that works and that works well. So you can ask me then if you are a fellow marketer or a fellow designer, fellow product manager, project manager, or like a fellow entrepreneur, even like a business owner, like agency owner, for example, such as myself. You can ask me, tell me then if with Make, I don't need to know how to code, and with n8n, I do need to know at least the basics of how to code. What are the benefits, like what are the advantages of me actually utilizing n8n instead of just making something more simple in terms of like logistics, in terms of like technicalities with Make? So I will tell you what are the advantages of utilizing n8n, even though it is more complex for non-coders. So you will essentially have way more flexibility with what you build, because Make is a platform that is very closed into its own logic. So essentially, if you want to create like new variables, or if you want to work your way around the variables that they already have over here, for example, this little syntax simplification that they did over here, if you want to have anything that is a bit more like personalized, a bit more complex, a bit more nuanced, you might not be able to do it directly with their own like logic / syntax system, or you have to do a way longer path in order to essentially build the same thing that you would be able to build in just one node into n8n. So it is less complex in terms of the individual node, because you don't have to have like coding background specifically for the manipulation of this specific node, but it can get more complex in terms of the workflow, because sometimes you will need like 2 times the number of steps to be able to build the same thing that you would build with like 50% less steps on n8n, just because you are able to set certain rules that are a bit more complex / a bit more flexible on a specific n8n node. So this is the main difference of why there are a lot of people that prefer n8n, because essentially they can build more complex, scalable, and even easier to debug workflow / backend application than they are able to do on Make. Make is slightly less scalable in my perception, and it can get pretty like complex in terms of the number of operations you need to do sometimes to do a very simple task, right? That you could do like in 3-4 steps on n8n. Here you need to do like in 10 steps, right? So I think if you want something more beginner friendly, Make is excellent. If you want something that will actually in the future turn into an app, or that will actually serve, for example, a lot of users, operations, blah blah blah, that you want to build, for example, your own AI agent, then n8n has more like infrastructure for that. And you can even self-host. So this is also something that is interesting in terms of, for example, keeping it more proprietary for you rather than utilizing a Make. Also, one big disclaimer that I need to do is that one thing that really bothers me with Make is the debug process, aka you trying to find an error that you have on your workflow. So over here, if you want to test a particular operation, you will have to test essentially all the workflow. I know that there are ways to go around that that you can utilize. You can try to separate over here, so essentially unlink these and then separate and just like test these like 3 operations here, for example. But overall, it is slightly harder for you to debug without having to go through at least a good chunk of the process over here, rather than with n8n, that you are able to essentially execute the automation starting from, for example, here. So if I want to see just if this, and this step are working, I can essentially choose to start from over here in this little like test step, and then it will go like through, for example, this, and this, instead of having to press like run once. And it always starts off with calling the webhook over here. That is the first step. So for some, like, again, more advanced type of scenarios that you have to constantly debug just one particular operation / one particular task, so to speak, and then can be more robust, can be slightly less annoying for you to do that, rather than the standard way that we do on make.con. So make.con, I would say that overall, bottom line, is made more for like marketers, designers, project managers that don't have a lot of knowledge about coding and want to do simpler day-to-day automation without having too much hassle to like learn how to code and like know specifically how to create an AI agent or something more complex, or like how to call an API, get, post, blah. And n8n is made for you to actually replace slash make it simpler for you to have a back-end coding system, so you don't have to always have like a back-end developer to help you to essentially manipulate APIs, to do JSON, to do like Python, etc. You are able to make it way less complex than it would be if you were to develop manually yourself, or if you were to hire a developer to do it by themselves. So essentially, it makes it less complex for you to do coding, but it is a low code, aka there is still a bit of coding in the process of utilizing n8n. So it is made for more complex, more robust day-to-day operations. So essentially, if you're a marketing agency and you want to do just like basic stuff like I showed over here, like a ClickUp automation, a Monday automation, a simple report, like weekly, monthly report, then it might not make sense for you to essentially utilize n8n. But if you are, for example, a big agency, if you are a web dev agency and you want to, for example, automate a performance analysis that you are doing with Google Analytics, Microsoft Clarity, etc., and then you have to like have all this complexity in terms of how you want to do it, then n8n is the best tool if you have a fellow person that knows at least like a little bit about how to code. So if you want to learn more about how to do automation and how you can actually have a no-code, low-code AI coding system into your agency, then you can feel free to subscribe. Or if you want help with a particular project, you can always book a call with me, also on the description down below or on the first comments down below, so I can essentially help you to understand how you can have more efficient and cost-friendly systems into your agency. See you on the next one. Thank you so much.